Okay, this one it's the start of Section 2, or what used to be Section 2, and it's called The United States Declares War. We're going to look at a chunk of slides here that are going to explain uh, why we get involved in the war and why we choose to get involved on the Allied side. Oh, too fast, jeez. All right, so we're supposed to be able to trade with both sides, neutral, no problems. But that's not the way things go, unfortunately. The British Navy was far stronger than Germany's. Germany's was good, but their main weapon was the U-boat, which not very good at doing certain things. And so the British attempt a blockade of German ports. No goods get in, no goods get out, and especially United States goods. And a blockade can be really effective depending on where you're located geographically and if your navy is strong. And the British, had a great location compared to the Germans, and also did have a strong navy. So Germany, in turn, attempts to use their U-boats to blockade the United States. The British say it's a dirty weapon because you can't see it. It comes out of nowhere. The torpedoes hit you before you even know they're coming. And so those U-boats roamed the sea looking for merchant ships. They would submerge and they would fire their torpedoes. Now, obviously, both armies are violating our rights, as we are supposed to be able to trade as a neutral nation. The British used a blockade and steal method. They blockaded us from being able to get to where we were going, and then they would stop our ships, ask where we were going, and when we reported that we were headed to Germany, they would literally take all the goods off the boat, or they would set the crew adrift in a lifeboat and take the ship, period. Basically stealing weapons from American companies. Now, take in mind, this is not American military selling to the sides. These are American businesses. The Germans, though, they really break the rules. A submarine itself does not work well for blockades, but when you know that there's a boat coming into an area that doesn't belong there, you shoot it. You just sink it. Now, the difference here is if the British stop you, everybody lives. If the Germans stop you, everybody on board the boat dies. And so neutral passengers and sailors are dying in an attempt to trade. Americans generally tended to look the other way when the British did things because their sons and husbands came back alive. The Germans killed them. Now, if you're wondering why did the Germans kill them, if a submarine comes to the surface and it gets shot, it becomes a brick and everybody on board dies. Look up what the bends are. You'll love that one. If you end up diving too deep in the water, your body goes. It's not good. Okay. Now, Woodrow Wilson, the president of the United States, obviously has a position on this, and he protests against both sides on what they're doing. He could have cut off trade. He could have said, that's it, we're not trading with them anymore, but it was too profitable. And also, since it wasn't the government doing the trading, Wilson had to go along with what American businesses wanted, and American businesses wanted to continue trading. Remember, there's no millionaires and billionaires on those boats, and so when they get shot down, those business owners are ticked off because they lose a shipment, but they still live to make millions another day. Wilson did, however, take a stronger stand against the Germans. In February of 1915, he told them that they would be held strictly accountable for sunk ships. Strictly accountable is kind of tough because what does that mean? Strictly accountable could mean, if you keep doing this, we go to war, we're going to fine you, who knows, or we'll stop trading with you. The problem is things get worse when the Lusitania gets sunk. The Lusitania is not an American boat. Okay, it's not an American boat, not. Belongs to the British. And the Lusitania is a cruise ship. Now, the Lusitania was bound for England, but the thing that was weird about the Lusitania is there was no one in steerage, or the lowest level of the boat. The Germans saw it, they sunk it. They claimed that the Lusitania was carrying weapons. The British obviously claimed that there were none on board, and the Americans claimed that there were none on board. About 1,200 people died, and 130 of them were Americans. Now, we know now that there were weapons on board the ship. However, to the rest of the world, it looks really bad when the Germans sank a cruise boat. Now, if Wilson would have wanted to go to war, he would have gotten it. But instead, that whole strictly accountable thing, instead he demanded an apology and damages and a promise to never do it again. And obviously the Germans go along with that in a heartbeat. We promise we'll never do it again, Woodrow. We're not bad people. And then they sink a boat called the Sussex a couple of months later, another passenger vessel, and about 80 are killed. Woodrow Wilson's ticked. You ever had the parent who threatens and threatens and threatens and doesn't do anything? Unfortunately, that's what Woodrow Wilson's starting to look like, because he tells the Germans, that's it, I swear, that don't do it again. And the Germans say fine. And they come back with something called the Sussex Pledge. Now, the Sussex Pledge is the German promise that they're not going to sink any more boats without giving a warning. So if they see an American boat, the submarine is going to come to the surface. It's going to warn the Americans. They have time to get off the boat into their lifeboats, just like the British do. And then once the Americans are safely away, then the boat will be sunk. For some reason, we agree to this, and life goes on. Now, kind of a historical side note, Woodrow Wilson gets reelected in 1916 using a slogan, "He kept us out of war," defeats a guy named Charles Evans Hughes. Don't worry about Charles Evans Hughes. It doesn't matter because he lost. Not too long after that, the Germans decide to test our patience. They start doing what's called unrestricted submarine warfare again, where they start sinking things on sight. The reason being, really plain and simple, you can buy an American flag anywhere. And so American flags started flying over British ships and French ships, and when the Germans would come to the surface to warn us, they would shoot down the German submarines and everyone on board the sub would die. American merchants started putting guns on their boats to sink the Germans when they were getting their warning. Germany knew this would probably bring us into the war, but they felt they had to do something. And that's when things get really dicey. Unrestricted submarine warfare is a huge reason why we get involved in the war. But the Zimmermann Note is another one. Germany sent a telegraph to Mexico that we intercepted. Turns out that if you want to send a telegraph back then between Germany and Mexico, it has to come through New York City. And basically what the Zimmermann Note did, or the Zimmermann Telegram or the Zimmermann Telegraph, it's called all three, was it asked Mexico to go to war with us to kind of keep us busy. And then when Germany won the war in Europe, they would come over and help the Mexicans defeat us, and they would give back all the land in the Southwest that we gained during the Mexican-American War. No one took it seriously, but Woodrow Wilson sent this note to the newspapers, and they published it and made a lot of people mad. Now, the war resolution, this between March 16th and 18th, 1917, the Germans sunk 3 more U.S. ships. Woodrow Wilson said, "That's it. I swear, this time I'm going to screw it. We're going to war." And so Wilson ran out of patience, and the U.S. Congress voted unanimously to go to war. He says in his speech, "The world must be made safe for democracy." There were a few congressmen that were opposed to this. Jeanette Rankin, who was the first woman voted into Congress, was one of them, citing that she didn't raise her son to be a soldier, like the popular song. Now, so when you think about this, the main reasons why the United States decided to go to war: 1, the Allies owed us money; 2, unrestricted submarine warfare, the Germans sinking our ships without any kind of warning; and that Zimmermann telegram, note, telegraph, whatever you want to call it, are all major contributors that get us involved, okay? Now, this is not a cause, but it's important that you know that this is going on. About this same time, Russia undergoes a revolution. Animal Farm. Talking Pigs, Animal Farm. In 1917, Russia had probably suffered the largest amount of casualties of any other place. They'd had 1.5 million soldiers killed, 2.5 million prisoners taken, and millions of people injured. A lot of people were unhappy with the Tsar, the Romanov family, for what they saw as weird behavior, the whole protecting the son, and Rasputin, the Russian monk who was involved in being the family's advisor. And so in March of 1917, a group of revolutionaries called the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, overthrow the royal family. Lenin actually got into Russia because the Germans helped smuggle him in with the idea that he would overthrow the family and pull Russia out of the war. He killed the royal family, or his group killed the royal family, and then they took control. The very, very first thing that Lenin did was pull Russia out of the war, which made it much easier because Germany only had to fight on one side. That revolution story is crazy. If you ever get a chance to look up what happens to Rasputin and the whole Anastasia story, it's nuts. That's the end of the 3rd video. Again, going a little quick here, but remember that you can't ask questions as you need. Please feel free to do that, and we'll see you in the next one.